Hello and welcome to the MB Om podcast, where you will learn to master the business of yoga with guests from around the world who have experienced becoming successful yoga teachers, studio owners, and much more. Now, here's your host, Amanda Kingsmith.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the MB Om podcast. I'm Amanda and I'll be your host for this and all episodes of the show. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by FavYogis. Do you teach privately? Make payment and registration a breeze. Use the FavYogis app to create and manage classes for your personal clients. Life is just easier with autopay. You can forget about remembering to Venmo, or if you're up in Canada, sending an invoice, an e-transfer, or a PayPal, depending on where your clients are in the world. With FavYogis, you can use autopay to enable repeating payments. This will save you so much time and make things so much easier. You can also keep your calendars in sync. Google Calendar integration automatically updates teacher and student classes when you make changes. It's still just your yoga. Teachers add classes, students add teachers and students stay connected. Head on over to the App Store and find FavYogis, FavYogis. Use code MBOM and let them know that I sent you. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you in part by PunchPass. And PunchPass is a booking software that lets you effortlessly manage your customers, the passes they purchase, and the classes they attend. It's the simplest, most flexible tool you'll find on the market now, and you really get exactly what you need without the headache. They offer 3 payment plans, so you don't have to pay for features you don't use, and on top of that, they have top-notch customer service. So go ahead and give their free trial a go and see for yourself what PunchPass is like. Head on over to punchpass.com/MBOM to start your free trial today. And best part is that you don't even have to enter your credit card. All right, now on to today's episode of the podcast. I'm very excited to be joined by Shannon Roche, who is the CEO of Yoga Alliance. And over the last couple of months, there's been a lot of changes and a lot of conversation happening with and from Yoga Alliance. They've made a lot of big announcements about how they're going to improve the membership, talking about how to make it more valuable for yoga teachers, and really talking with yoga teachers about what changes are coming down the pipeline in terms of making Yoga Alliance really a valuable resource for us as yoga teachers. And a lot of that has meant that they're changing the standards and upping the game for how they're going to actually bring some regulation and consistency to the yoga industry. This has caused a ton of conversation, a lot of people to feel concerned, worried, nervous, maybe even angry. And I'm really, really excited to be able to talk with Shannon and ask her all the questions that we have as yoga teachers. So I pulled a bunch of people in Yoga Business Badasses to see what questions they had. So many of the questions from today's conversation are not only my own questions that I had, but also questions that you guys, listeners of the show, had for Shannon. And we start by talking about, where she was before this, why she got into working with Yoga Alliance, what she's most excited about, where she sees Yoga Alliance going, and then we dive into some of the more nitty-gritty about what the standards look like, why the changes are happening, how they're going to impact us as yoga teachers and as registered yoga schools, and so much more. So I hope that you guys really enjoy this conversation with Shannon, that you feel a little bit more comfortable with what's going on with Yoga Alliance, and hopefully inspired to get involved with what they're doing after this episode. All right, without further ado, here is Shannon. Shannon, welcome to the podcast today. I'm really excited to have you here with me today.
Amanda, thank you so much for having me and for inviting us. We're really thrilled to get to connect with you and your audience.
Yeah, I'm super excited for this conversation. And I have so many questions, my own questions, as well as questions from listeners of the show. But I want to start with a little bit about your background. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, and kind of where you were before you were CEO of Yoga Alliance?
Course. Really broadly, I think there's sort of 2 key points that are relevant about my background that I bring to Yoga Alliance. One, of course, is that I've been a long time practitioner. I have a practice of almost 20 years, and it's been an important part of my life. And then secondly, that my sort of professional background is largely in membership communities and really focusing on membership community engagement, and also nonprofit organizations in moments of either startup or transition. And so hopefully those pieces will prove to be pretty relevant for my work here at Yoga Alliance.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds definitely very, very relevant. And I'm curious, what are you most excited about stepping into this role with Yoga Alliance?
So many things. I guess if the things that I would focus on really, and that I do focus on every day, are I see a tremendous opportunity for this organization to support its members in ways that I think are probably manageable for us to put in place, and hopefully will make a big impact in teachers' day-to-day lives and in their businesses, that in turn will allow them to do the work that's so important that they do more easily and just with more support. I think we'll get into some of the details of that, I'm sure, but really it just, there's so much we can do to be supportive of members, and there's so much that our members do every day to just make people's lives better. So hard to not feel good about waking up in the morning and getting to go do that.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. And I think, as all probably listeners know, and you're clearly very aware of, there's lots of changes happening right now. And I guess one of the things that I was most excited to kind of pick your brain about is your vision for Yoga Alliance as the CEO. Like, where do you see Yoga Alliance over the next couple of years?
So this is going to sound like a funny place to start, but I promise I'll get to where I'm going. My hope is that over the next, 5 to 10 years, we can play a role in what I sort of refer to as growing the pie of opportunity for teachers. And, one of the things that really attracted me to the role was that I think I see in the community, like you see in so many communities, from my background in nonprofits, but also you sort of think about, personal people who work with people. You see in the community a sense that there's sort of a limited amount of opportunity, which I completely understand and have so much empathy for. I believe that there is actually nearly, an unlimited amount of opportunity if we can kind of align teachers' availability and students' sort of interest and knowledge about teachers. So my hope broadly is that we Yoga Alliance can play a significant role in sort of, opening up that landscape of opportunity for teachers, and that's all sort of business oriented language. But really at the end of the day, all of that is in service of more people being able to practice more yoga, right? Which I think is only really good for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, as a yoga teacher myself, I definitely agree. It's definitely what gets me. I taught at 6:30 a.m. this morning. That's the only thing that gets me out of bed at 5:15. So I definitely feel that. I'm curious, and maybe I don't know if you guys have kind of figured this all out yet, but I'm curious, what does that actually look like? Like, how does Yoga Alliance, 5-10 years down the road, actually act as a body that can help teachers get more jobs and get better jobs and get paid better and all that sort of thing?
Sure. I think, the standards review project that we just undertook is one good example. There are lots of others that we have in the hopper. But for example, I think, and I suspect we'll get to this, but, I think it's fair to say that the sense of how necessary or helpful a Yoga Alliance credential is to someone's professional opportunities has been variable over the recent years. And much of the standards review work we undertook with the intention of clarifying that value proposition, right? There are lots of pieces underneath that. A lot of it was focused on making sure that that teaching and teacher training is of a consistent and high quality, and that students have opportunities to practice safely, and all of those things. Another sort of element of that is that if we can clarify the value of the credential for ourselves and then as a follow-on for the marketplace, then I think just having that credential is a good example of something that can help teachers reach more opportunity. So that's one example. I think another one that we will undertake now that we've got the standards behind us, we'll undertake in relatively short order is starting to think about what we as an organization can do to partner with potential employers to make sure that now that we have done that work around sort of shoring up the credential, people who might employ yoga teachers know about it and know that it's valuable, and know where to look for those teachers who hold it. So lots of opportunities for us, I think, to really, like I said, grow the pie, and broaden the landscape.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love all of that. It makes so much sense to me. It's kind of like, if you can create something that people across the board clearly see as like, okay, when you are Yoga Alliance certified as a yoga teacher, it means you've been trained well. It means that you're coming out of teacher training ready to be a great teacher. And then teachers can turn around to studios and say, I trained with a Yoga Alliance certified company. Then it's like, or teacher training program, then they can get hired easier, maybe negotiate pay higher, et cetera, which is good for everyone in the industry. It means that teachers get paid better, they get treated better, they get more job opportunities. And most importantly, people get great yoga practices from those teachers because they have those great certifications.
Exactly. We should hire you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that. It's so clear to me. So I'm really excited for all of that to kind of be fleshed out. And I think I'm sure you've answered a bazillion questions about this, but the biggest thing that people were asking me in the Facebook community when I polled them is, what do these changes coming down the pipeline mean for already registered yoga teachers? So if, like for example, I'm an RYT 500, what do these changes mean for me as a teacher?
Mm-hmm. The good news, and I want to be really clear about this because we have gotten a lot of questions about it. The good news is that if you are a teacher, if you are a registered yoga teacher with us now, that doesn't change. And so I think hopefully what our teachers will see is really just this sort of up-leveling of the landscape around them. But I don't want anybody to feel or fear that the changes mean that they need to redo their trainings or that their credentials have been stripped or any of those. None of that is true. They are still registered yoga teachers, and we are thrilled that they are. For now, a lot of what was in the announcement that we released on June 25th was focused on schools and in particular RYS 200 programs. We have a whole timeline of work ahead that will focus on some of the sort of higher professional level credentials, 300, 500, continuing education providers, all of those things. But I think, in short, really, it's that teachers are still teachers.
Awesome. And so is there going to be anything coming down the pipe where, if, for example, let's just use a random example, if the program that I did for my 200-hour turns out that, their credentials are not good enough, is there going to be like a course I have to take in the future? Or is it like you're registered, you did it, you're good as an already certified teacher, and then just continuing to get your continuing education credits and making yourself better?
More the latter. We are not looking to strip anybody's, their existing qualifications because they were qualified, right?
Mm-hmm.
They met the qualifications at the time. If anything, we might potentially look at whether there are opportunities to add to their qualifications, but that is not work that's sort of front and center for us right now. We still have lots of work to do on the other school programs first.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I feel like there's probably a lot of people heaving sighs of relief right now, so that's great.
I'll just say it now so I don't have to sound like a broken record. If folks have any questions whatsoever, they can feel free to reach out to our member services team at any point, and I'm happy to share the phone number, email address, website link, all that stuff. I can get that to you separately.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. I'll make sure it's in the show notes and whatnot so people know how they can contact and all that good stuff. Obviously I read the announcement emails and stuff, but with the registered yoga schools, so I know that this stuff is happening kind of in stages. If you're currently an RYT 200 and you have, or even RYT 500, I guess was the previous qualification, and you're a lead teacher trainer, you have to become an ERYT 500 before 2021. Is that right? 2022?
Yes. Although the timeline makes the story a little harder than a straight yes or no. the change that I think you're referring to is the change in qualifications to be a lead trainer. And that is that as of February 2022, in order to be a lead trainer, one needs to hold an ERYT 500. And I say it that way because similarly, we've gotten a lot of questions about this particular set of changes. And I don't want people to think that that date of February 2022 is a sort of one and done moment, right? If people, lots of people may not even be thinking about being lead trainers at this moment in time or then. If 10 years from now they decide that that's a career path that they'd like to pursue, they're still absolutely, able to and would be qualified to, if they reach that level, pursue their ERYT 500 and qualify in that way. So what we're trying to do really is just, again, up level the qualification level for lead trainers, not cut anybody out.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I think that makes sense to me. I mean, I just did my 300-hour with and really exceptional yoga school and great lead teacher trainer. And the knowledge that she has is stuff that, as somebody who's only been teaching for 4 years, like I certainly couldn't be offering that right now. And I mean, from the business side of things, I see how a teacher training is a very lucrative way to make your yoga business successful full time. But I do think we have to consider, like, do we have the experience to be offering these types of things? And we have to get really honest with that. I think that's really important.
First of all, congratulations. That is
Thank
a
you.
ton of work and really impressive. And I agree. I mean, I think, and interestingly, this was one of the pieces of feedback that we received through the standards review process that we ran, which was a very, or at least we attempted to make it a very open, inclusive, process through which we got a lot of input and feedback from members, and not just members, but the community broadly. This was one piece where, regardless of kind of one's background or qualifications, there was really strong consensus around exactly what you just described, that, if nothing else, we should, as a community, make sure that the people who are charged or who we're charging with handing down this knowledge to the next generation of teachers are doing so from a place of breadth and depth and their own, deep, long experience. And that isn't to say that others aren't able to assist or able to contribute, and that they won't at some point be able to do the same thing themselves. But that this, that was a real strong piece of feedback that we received.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's going to be a really great change coming forward. And I think it's awesome that you guys are doing this, kind of rolling it out in stages and being considerate of the people who already have these schools. And for, many people, they do have, they might have the experience now, even though they don't have that E in front of it. So giving them time to kind of earn that. I'm curious, is the process for getting the E, is that going to change over the next couple of years, or what is that process going to look like?
We don't anticipate any major changes to that, actually. The structure that's in place now for attaining one set of qualifications versus another, it continues to be the same structure and process. It's really just sort of, what is required at different levels of qualification that's changed.
Right. And so the ERYT 500 is that after you've done your 500 hours of training, you've taught for 1,000 or more, like in class hours. That's how you get that, correct?
There's two levels, actually. So there's ERYT 200, in which case you need, in order to qualify for that, you need to teach a minimum of 1,000 hours over a minimum of 2 years. And then ERYT 500 is, after your training, teach a minimum of 2,000 hours over 4 years.
Okay, cool.
And of those 2,000 hours, I believe it's 500 that need to come after graduation of that second program.
Oh, cool. That sounds good. Awesome. I love that. What about teachers who want to offer continuing education programs? What's the sort of, process / certification going to be like for that?
Again, good news here, I think, for those folks is that there aren't significant changes that we have in train right now. That the Yoga Alliance Continuing Education Provider Credential, sometimes called YACUP, which is a bit of
it's a long acronym.
that continues to be what it is, and it is also on the list of of credentials and programs that we're planning to look at for a similar kind of announcement at roughly this time next year.
Okay, sounds good. And so for that, it's once you've got your ERYT 500, you can apply to be a continuing education provider, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So that stuff is going to stay relatively similar for the actual processes of getting that. So not much is really changing there.
Not much is changing there. That's correct. And I do want to sort of caveat that we were clear, very clear, that we have a lot of work ahead of us to implement the changes that we've announced. Again, most of which were focused on the RYS 200. And we believe that it is incredibly important for all kinds of reasons that when we do that work, we're able to do it in a way that is clear and understandable and effective. And so we're focused now on implementing what it was that we just announced. And we have a timeline, and that's, as you've mentioned, that we are planning to roll that out over time. That will be true of any future changes that we make as well, right? So if there comes a point in time when, we look together as a community and say, oh, this actually does need a tweak here, we'll make sure that folks know what that change is and what the process is and what the timeline is.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, upping the game of the standards is going to be a game changer for Yoga Alliance in general. And I think that as you guys see that roll out, I'm sure you'll be able to see like what other kind of gaps are there? What other stuff do we have to look at? And I think one thing as a yoga teacher that I really appreciate with this is how transparent like everyone from Yoga Alliance has been with the emails, the ability to ask questions. I mean, the fact that we're having this conversation is amazing. And also just like recognizing that, for a lot of people, this is their livelihood. And it's really scary when all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, am I not going to be able to teach yoga, my classes tomorrow? And I think from my perspective as a teacher, it seems like, from your end, it's been handled very, very positively. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. We are trying really hard to make sure that we're making it as easy and manageable and understandable as possible. We remain at any time open to feedback. So if people are confused or concerned or feel that we could have done something better, would welcome that as well.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. And so I'm curious, and this is a question that I got quite a bit, is what are the new standards going to be for actually checking yoga teacher training curriculums? How do we ensure that teacher trainings are actually delivering what they say? And I feel like one of the things that I've thought about a lot when it comes to Yoga Alliance is like, it's really tough. Like there are thousands and thousands of teacher trainings happening at any one time all over the world. And you guys certainly cannot be in all those places at once. So, how do we make sure that these standards are in place and actually upheld?
Oh, well, thank you. That is, needless to say, of huge concern to us as well. We have actually put in place as part of these changes, not only changes to the standards themselves, but changes that I think are significant and meaningful to our own processes. And I hope that those will speak to some of the questions that you're getting and hearing. In particular, we've made a handful of changes to our application and our accountability processes. So we have set up two separate things. We've significantly changed and increased the type of information and the amount of information that we are asking from schools when they apply. Previously, it was pretty high level and didn't really give us a meaningful window into what was really being taught. That's no longer the case. Our team will be getting pieces of information like manuals and curricula and sort of planned draft schedules, so that we can really get a sense of what is in this program and is it feasible, right? Not only obviously for the accountability perspective, but also just because there's a tremendous amount of knowledge and experience on our team of, this works, this doesn't. And so if someone sees something that they think, oh gosh, that's going to be really hard, we can share that feedback with applicants too. So more information on our side. We've restructured the way in which that information is reviewed. So previously we had one person review each application, which is great for efficiency, but not necessarily great for consistency or, any one person having just a bad day. So instead, we're putting in panels of, for now, it'll be a panel style review of 3 people who will take a look at every application. So I think that'll make a significant difference. And then to get to the question that you're asking, we will ask schools to apply to be re-credentialed every 3 years. And so, I think you're pointing out a challenge for us, and I think for anyone looking at teacher training programs, which is that there is a tremendous amount of information and that it's changing pretty constantly. So instead of necessarily asking, small business owners who are running teacher training programs to spend all day, every day updating us on those changes, we've put a structure in place that says, check back in with us every couple of years. Let's just make sure we're all on the same page. And then hopefully we can all sort of go about our business again.
Right. Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, I think that, yoga is an ancient practice, right? So the philosophy and stuff is probably not shifting that much, but there's always like opportunities to learn how to deliver that better and new technologies coming out and lots more information coming out on ways that we can move in the body and stuff like that. So, yeah, I like that. It's like not an annoying thing where you have to check in like every 6 months or something like that, but also having some accountability so that a school isn't offering the same thing that they offered 20 years ago.
Exactly. Or, in the other direction, their training program has evolved over the years, and 20 years from the last time, we had this conversation, maybe the number of hours is just adding up differently than it used to. All well-intentioned, but, worth our taking a look at every so often.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey yogis, I just wanted to take a quick little break to talk about studio growth. Has your yoga studio's growth become stagnant? If you're like many studio owners I talk to, you've tried every marketing tactic under the sun. You started a blog, you're posting regularly on all the social media sites, running challenges, sending out newsletters, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, you're doing a ton of work and barely paying the bills. What if there was an easier way? A way to get new students regularly coming through the door without having to do so much work to get them there. A proven system that will consistently bring in 20 plus new paying students to your studio each and every month. Well, there is. Ron Medlin and his team at GetYogaStudents.com have developed a 3-step system that will help you quickly grow your yoga studio to a 6-figure profits and beyond without being shackled to your business. So if you're ready to grow fast and you'd like the blueprint to help you get started, visit GetYogaStudents.com today to get the exact system Ron and his team uses to help his yoga studio clients add 10, 20, or even 30 new students every single month. On top of that, you get a free 45-minute consultation session. So if you're kind of like, I'm not really too sure about all this, I don't want to fork out a bunch of money without even knowing if this is going to work, head on over to GetYogaStudents.com, book a free consultation, and just talk with Ron. He's got so much knowledge, and him and his team are willing to work with you with your studio's needs. And once again, it's getmoreYogaStudents.com to start getting more students in your yoga studio today. This episode is also brought to you in part by PunchPass. You heard me talk about PunchPass at the beginning of this episode, and I am so excited to be partnered with them. Before we continue with the episode, I wanted to tell you a couple more things about the software. So with PunchPass, they have really done their best to make sure that you can focus on the business that you enjoy and let them take the hassle off your hands. And they've done so in a way that we can afford as businesses. One of the things that I love the most about PunchPass is that they're a small business, just like you and just like me. And so they're made for us. They're not a big company that's just charging us a lot of money for the services. They understand that we're small businesses as yoga teachers, and they really want us to be able to do what we love, which is teach yoga. So if you've been looking for some sort of software that can make your yoga business a lot more simple, head on over to punchpass.com/MBOM to start your free trial today. All right, back to the episode. I think something I'm curious about is I feel like there's a lot of people who are really great yoga teachers, full of knowledge, but I don't think that that necessarily equates to being a great curriculum developer. I mean, sometimes it does, but it doesn't always. And there's definitely like a skill set around developing curriculum. And I know that there's people who are out there helping yoga teacher trainers do that. Is that something that Yoga Alliance is going to work with teacher trainers on? Like if they submit something and you're like, okay, yeah, great fundamentals, but like deliveries maybe not so great based on what we've seen. Is that something that you guys will kind of help teachers with?
In a way, yes. So we, in addition to the changes to the standards for folks who are at that higher level and who are looking at being lead trainers, we are also putting in place a pedagogy course requirement for exactly that purpose. And we've tried in this announcement, and I think in general, we try to be really careful about where we draw the line between kind of when we take on and provide the content or do the work versus when we just try to sort of set out some guidelines and direction and allow teachers to do the work that they're so good at. So that was more of our structure here, was to say, let's make sure that anybody who is in the position of developing curricula has some kind of framework for that. And then there will be lots of different ways that they can go about solving for getting that framework.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. Do you ever foresee like the 200-hour, 500-hour structure shifting? And I guess I'm thinking about, from somebody who specializes more in the business side of yoga, my business sort of came from having a business background, doing my 200-hour, feeling like I was very unequipped on the business side of things, diving into that personally, and then recognizing that I could share that with others. And then I've had so many conversations with people who specialize in other things like anatomy, like you just cannot teach all the anatomy of the human body in the time that you have in a training. And I think that, on the one hand, it's really important to identify that, like, the well is deep with yoga. And that goes for not just business and anatomy, but philosophy, cueing, adjustments, all that sort of thing. I guess it's made me think, like, do we need bigger trainings? Do we need more requirements before we're actually stepping in the studio and working with people who have all sorts of crazy things going on in their bodies?
I love this question. There's like lots of different ways to go with it. And we will be looking at a lot of the elements of what you've highlighted. I guess what I'd say to the specific question of, do we think that we will be looking at the structure of the number of hours, or do I anticipate a change to that in the near future? What I would say to that is, I think it is dependent on what we see as demand in the community. And so to a certain extent, I think, that is a question that will get answered by programs as they continue to proliferate and as these standards are put in place. And I say it that way in particular because for two reasons. One, I don't want us to sort of overstep too far into, what is it that what should every school be teaching, literally sort of day by day. And also because I think the way that you framed it is spot on. And one of the things that I think we were trying to do with this first up-leveling of the standards, which is to get clear about what the purpose of each of these programs is, mm-hmm. right? And so, I think you're exactly right. There, you could spend, a lifetime studying any one of the things you just mentioned, and some people do. You can also serve a particular purpose and teach a certain kind of set of students and audience really well with a 200-hour training if you're clear about what it is that you're doing. Mm-hmm. And that too actually is something that came through loud and clear in the feedback that we heard through the standards review process. I think lots of folks, including a lot of people on our team, came to the process thinking to themselves, clearly the answer is everybody should have a minimum of, insert your multiple of thousands of hours of training here. And then as we really kind of dove into, what the problems were that we were trying to solve for, where we landed was that it's at first, for now, I think most important for Yoga Alliance to do two things. One, make sure that what our credential says it is offering is in fact what it is offering, right? And I'll come back to that. And two is make sure that we are all, including the public and students, clear about what it is that, a 200-hour provides versus a 500-hour versus, a 10-year in-depth study with a guru.
Right.
And so let me stop there and see if, before I keep talking, I'll let you sort of see if there's anything in particular you would like me to expound on.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so much good stuff in there. I feel like you can continue with your train, and then I'll take it from there.
So I said I'd come back to the, sort of making sure that our credential, in fact, offers what it says it's going to offer. One of the things that we were able to surface in the course of this 18-month engagement with the community is that there's a lot of confusion, understandably, I would say, about this idea of contact versus non-contact hours. I think in and of itself, that the definitions are a little unclear sometimes, and then the numbers allowed have changed over the years. And so what we discovered was that in that lack of clarity, um, it, some training programs were not necessarily adding up to 200 hours, which was actually not the main or the greatest number of people by far. Actually, what the problem that we really surfaced was that the perception is that none of the training programs are adding up to 200 hours, which I'm happy to say is not at all true. But one of the things we were trying to solve for in this iteration of standards up-leveling is making sure that that we're all clear about what we mean when we say 200 hours. And so you've probably noticed in the changes to the standards that we've removed this idea of contact versus non-contact hours, and instead are focusing on, okay, we're still at 200 hours as a minimum. Certainly schools are welcome to do more, and certainly lots do, but those 200 hours should all be essentially instructional hours or classroom hours. And I think that in and of itself will go a long way to answering some of the questions that come up around, is this credential or is this kind of training enough for what the folks holding it and using it are trying to do?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really love that. I mean, I've heard about trainings that are, I don't know, as short as like maybe 10 days type thing. And I'm like, are your contact hours like every single hour you spend at this place? Because like, how do you get 200 hours in there? I did my first 200 hours in intensive, and it was like 30 days. And I feel like it was like not enough. So it's like, how are you doing this in 10 days and becoming a yoga teacher? Like the well is so deep with yoga.
Right. And I think, we're trying to make sure that some of that just lack of clarity, we just take that off the table, because I think that should just make everything easier for everyone. And then again, I think really making sure that, for ourselves and as a community, we're getting a little more clear and a little more specific about, what this training is meant to sort of prepare one for versus that training versus another.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That totally makes sense. Thank you for clarifying all of that. I feel like all of that sounds really positive. And
Excellent.
yeah, and so I'm curious, kind of related to that. I feel like online trainings are something that, are popping up more and more. I mean, even in kind of like the university college scene, there's more and more degrees that you can get online. Where are you guys sort of standing when it comes to online trainings with yoga?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it is a rapidly evolving field and a rapidly evolving question and set of answers. In the recent announcement, we announced that we have added and allowed for some amount of online training in the RYS 200 for the first time. So in the new standards, once they go into effect, RYSs will be able to teach up to 20 hours each of anatomy and physiology and yoga humanities online. And in each case, it's 20 out of 30 hours, right? So it's a total hour requirement for each of those of 30, of which 20 can be taught online. And we did that, again, in response to feedback that we had gotten from people who've done a lot of teaching and training online, to try to manage this question around, is yoga and teaching yoga and training people to teach yoga, are we able to do that as well online? And is there something about it that is unique that can't be transmitted in the same way online as it can be in the room? That said, we also recognize that this is a place where everything is moving. And that not only that, but also that, making sure that some content where it's feasible it can be allowed online allows for a lot more people to train as teachers in a lot more places than it, necessarily having to show up at a studio, all day, every day in a particular location that may or may not be their home, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love that. I definitely understand that there's for sure challenges with that, and not everything is appropriate to be taught online, or maybe is more difficult and can only be executed well by some types of people or certain lead teachers and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. I feel like people are very tossed on this. Like even in my Facebook group, somebody asked this question and then somebody immediately countered it with like, I completely disagree that this should ever be a thing. And my point to it was like, well, there's a lot of amazing yoga teachers around the world, and a lot of them are really inaccessible to most people. I mean, even for me, I moved cities for my 300 hour because that's the training I wanted to do. And that only worked for me because I work remotely, and thankfully my partner does also. So it was a 3-month program. Like, how else do you do that? And I was the only person in the program from somewhere else. So like, how sad is it that nobody from outside of that city is able to go unless they have, this very unique living situation, which like I fully acknowledge that my living situation is quite weird. So, I see the benefits in being able to do that online stuff. In saying that, how do we uphold the standards with online trainings?
I mean, that is the key question. That for us, that's really where our team of applicant reviewers will come in, and our structural change to re-credential will come in. And in fact, that's one of the reasons that we wanted to make sure we had that check, every few years to, in particular, this is a space that will continue to evolve and evolve quickly. And so we wanted to make sure that, as people, as small business owners running their teacher training programs are evolving with it, that we were able to just check back in.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I was thinking about how in some ways there might be a benefit to online, because if they have online stuff recorded, I mean, I guess you guys could be going through and actually watching that, which is seeing what the teachers are actually seeing. Is that something you guys will be doing, or is it not quite going that deep, at least at this point?
At this moment, we don't necessarily have that as part of our plans for requirements for the application. Having said that, I'm 100% certain that there will be a lot of my colleagues who will be watching them just out of curiosity anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that I think you sort of pointed to there, which I think is really exciting, is that there is an opportunity if you've got content that's online or recorded. There's opportunity for students to go back and revisit it and refresh. And so, I think there's understandably a lot of trepidation about the idea of whether, like I said, some or any of this can be taught as well or appropriately online. But there are real upsides too, that, we're trying to figure out how best to take advantage of. And that's one that everybody that we've talked to is really excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that from the student side of things, and especially like having done 2 yoga teacher trainings, like it's a lot of content to digest. I feel like I would actually, and my lead teacher for my 300 hours, she did some voice recordings for some of her trainings. And that was usually like if somebody happened to miss that day, then the requirement was you had to listen to it later or whatever. But it was really awesome because she would send them to all of us, and there'd be sometimes like, you're tired, or maybe you're just not digesting it well, or some of those things are really complex to understand. And I just like listened to her voice talking about it again. And it was really awesome to have that.
Absolutely. Well, and, you also just sort of pointed at another thing that I think is so important. Different people learn differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this too is an opportunity for folks who, I know myself, there's a certain point at which there's only so much I can consume sitting in a classroom for X amount of, X number of hours. I think it'd be incredibly useful for me as a student and as a learner to be able to sort of approach that from a different angle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. And yeah, everyone does learn differently. So it is important to acknowledge that for sure. Something that I'm curious about is, and this is one of the questions that I got probably the most, and I feel like maybe you've gotten this as well, but over the last couple of years, there's been lots of people who were like, oh, Yoga Alliance just takes my money. They don't really do anything for me. Like, we should boycott them, et cetera, et cetera. as like going forward, and I think we've touched on this a little bit, but, why is it important that as yoga teachers, we register with Yoga Alliance, and what does Yoga Alliance do for us as yoga teachers?
I so appreciate that question and would be the first to acknowledge exactly what you've described. I think from my perspective, there's sort of, there's three big buckets of reasons. There's kind of the broad overarching reason, there's sort of individual reasons, and then there's what I think of as structural reasons. Broadly, I think one of the other things that we continue to hear from teachers and have since Yoga Alliance's founding is how important it is to them and therefore to us that anything that we do is in service of yoga continuing to be able to be a self-regulating community. And so one of the other reasons that we felt it was so important to do this up-leveling of our standards is because we felt that was the best and strongest way for us to build a case in the event of any future attempts to regulate, right? So, if someone were to come knocking, we can now sort of point to all the work that we just did and say, essentially, like, no, we're pretty good. Here are all the things that we're doing to make sure that we are in fact meeting our own standards and self-regulating effectively. So if that is important to people, that is one place that I'd really point to. We can't sit in an office ourselves, with our team of however many, tens of people, and make that so. We really need everyone's participation in the community to make that living and real. Personally, as an individual teacher, we have right now services to teachers that I think go a little bit unnoticed, and we're working on making sure that folks can sort of know and find those more easily. Lots of discounts, for example, on things that either support one's ability to teach, or in some cases to run a teacher training or a studio. In some cases, really actually just things that sort of, facilitate and enable your life, so that you can have time to run a teacher training or a studio. So there's just a lot of sort of literal benefits to be gained there. But we're also going to be focusing going forward on a lot more of these opportunities where we can support teachers' development and teachers' professional development. I'm thinking about, we're sort of where we started the conversation around the idea of doing some of the legwork to communicate to future and potential employers the value of the credential, right? So some of that, and frankly, a lot of that is in place, but we're working now to figure out how to let people know more clearly and more easily. Lots more to come. And then sort of structurally, what I would say, kind of harkens back to the first point I made, but this is a self-regulating community. It is a voluntary community, right? A RYS or an RYT credential is not required. We certainly hope that people will choose to attain them and see the value in them, but they're not required. And because of that, it's the community and the credential are only as good as we make the effort to make them, as a community and as a collective. And so, I welcome any and all suggestions of how we can do that better. We're all ears at any time, but we can't do that unless we know what people are thinking and what it is that they feel they need and that we could do better. And so, I would sort of point to that as a reason that, we'd like to be able to serve people as well as we can, but we can only serve you as well as you sort of tell us what it is that you're in need of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love all of that. And yeah, I feel grateful that you guys are continuing down the path of keeping it self-regulated. I feel like that's personally how I would prefer for it to be. But yeah, I think it is important, to have that mutual relationship and to remember that, we all have a bit of a responsibility in this. So I guess you mentioned a couple of small things, but I'm curious, on our end as yoga teachers, how can we support in making Yoga Alliance better for everyone in the yoga community? Because I don't think that this just rests on the shoulders of Yoga Alliance. I think that as yoga teachers, we also have a responsibility to be a part of upholding the standards and making sure that things are better for everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All about those symbiotic relationships.
Exactly. I think a couple of things come to mind for me. the this is going to sound, I don't mean for this to sound sort of silly, but it really is important. If there's something that you would like to see from the organization, or if there's something that you feel we're not doing well or that we're not doing at all, first and foremost, just tell us, right? I mean, this, if that is the case, it is pretty likely that it's because we don't know, or because we have gotten other feedback and therefore are prioritizing sort of moving in that direction. If we knew that there was reason to move in a different direction, we would absolutely consider it. And if that's the right choice for the complete membership, that's where we would go. And so I just would first and foremost invite people to share their thoughts and feedback. More specifically, I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. Anyone running a teacher training program has an opportunity to sort of shape our story for us. And so I would just ask folks to, and ask lead trainers in particular, to just kind of think about how one is presenting Yoga Alliance to your teacher training students. And for reasons I fully understand, it sounds like for the last several years, a lot of what we've been hearing as the kind of explanation of Yoga Alliance is more along the lines of like, they're there, you got to do this, it'll help you get your first job, like here's how.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it was presented to me in my 200 hour. And I was like, wait, what? Like, kind of confusing because you just assume that there's like something like you're like, okay, I'm going to be certified. And then they're like, yeah, well, there's like this thing, but it's like not really that great. So like, you don't really have to do it, but you should probably do it. And you're like, what?
Which again, I completely understand. I think I would actually really welcome, and my colleagues are going to kick me under the table for saying this, the proverbial table. But, if teacher trainers sort of framed it more along the lines of, there's this organization, there's an opportunity to shape and better it, please sort of lend your voice to the conversation. We were able to do a much better job. And I think that is a much different sort of frame for new graduating teachers. And the other things I would, just suggest that people think about it, and I know everyone is really busy and runs their businesses, and time is just non-existent. But if you see things that are of concern in your community, let us know. Again, we can only sort of take action on what it is that we're aware of, but we do have a team of folks who take a look at reports of inappropriate behavior or standards violations or whatever the case might be. And so please, send that our way if it's something that's of concern to you. We certainly want to take a look at it. And, on the flip side of that, if there are issues that we can be helpful with, think of us as a resource. The advocacy piece and the self-regulatory and regulation piece is a huge one that comes to mind. It takes a while for news of, sort of very local efforts or sort of rumors of regulation to make their way to us. But if we hear about them, we will look into them and figure out how we can best act on them. And so just please let us know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's so much good stuff in there. I think that one of the things that really stands out to me is like, I think that as a yoga teacher, like feeling like your voice is heard is really important. And that's definitely one of the things that I've really felt since you've stepped into this role. So thank you for hearing us as yoga teachers. I think that that's, the first piece of this conversation is feeling like, we can speak up about what's not working and feel like that is heard. So important. So yes, thank you.
I'm so appreciative of that. Thank you. And
yeah,
I think it's, I hope that that's one thing that I think about that every day. I participated in teacher trainings, but I chose not to teach. And so I think of myself as a student first. And so I am super crystal clear that, our members know a lot more about their day-to-day and their business than anybody sitting in an office in Washington does. And so, we are trying very hard to listen, and I hope that comes across. So thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, really. Thanks to you. But yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing that kind of stands out to me with that is I'm thinking about, I mentioned before, like I've always seen very clearly that Yoga Alliance has a big challenge with all the teacher trainings. And it makes me think that part of our responsibility as yoga teachers is really speaking up. So we have this place where we can be heard. Like if something's happening in the industry that you're seeing that you don't agree with, I think it is very much like, instead of turning and saying like, oh, Yoga Alliance isn't doing their job, I think it's considering that perhaps you guys don't even know that that's happening, and that part of our due diligence is to bring those things to your attention if we're seeing them, since we're in it every single day.
Thank you. I mean, we really would welcome that. We have right now, as of right now, we have almost, not quite, but nearly 7,000 registered schools and just shy of 100,000 registered teachers. And so, you're exactly right. We if we were to track all of the activity of all of those businesses and people, our membership dues would be far higher than I think anyone would be interested in. And so we really are reliant on folks letting us know what they're seeing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, absolutely. And then the last thing that kind of came to my mind as you were talking about that is I was just thinking about, as lead teachers, how you're presenting it to your teacher trainees who are so green. They have no idea, like maybe they've heard about Yoga Alliance before, but they probably don't know much about it. They're just excited to get registered and start teaching and that sort of thing. And then it's a little bit kind of disheartening almost when you hear somebody who's like, oh, well, like, it's not so great, but you kind of have to do it. And I do feel like there's definitely, sort of a bit of a responsibility for teacher trainings to be presenting it as something that's valuable. But then on the Yoga Alliance side, making sure that it is valuable, which we already talked about. And I think that from what I've heard is like schools go through the process of, and some schools are doing a really great job. They go through the process of submitting all their stuff. They pay their dues, which, are obviously more expensive than teachers. And then they feel like maybe they don't get anything in return. And I think that having the standards where like it really feels valuable to be an RYS, and then you turn around and say like, yes, you have been trained under a Yoga Alliance certified school. Like, of course you want to go get your certification with them, because like that's something that's going to be recognized. I think it's just that trickle down, right, of having that value and that reciprocity.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I couldn't frankly put it better. I mean, the one other thing that I sort of was thinking of as you were speaking that comes to mind for me is you're right? The school dues are higher than individual teacher dues. And that's an investment for those businesses. And so if I put on my sort of, nonprofit executive hat, as opposed to, Yoga Alliance, person sitting in this seat specifically, I want that investment to be worth the effort and worth the money. And I don't necessarily want to be undermining, the investment that I have made in my ability to offer that to students by saying that it's not worth the money. That's just sort of, that's what comes to mind for me. But obviously I don't want to tell people what to think about us. I'd far rather show them that it's worthwhile. So that's what we're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it will come. Like, the standards seem like a very great place to start, because it's, if people feel like, okay, I feel proud to be an RYS because I know that this is a good training because they've approved it, versus just being like, well, that other one has that stamp and like,
exactly,
it's not so hot. Like they're just churning yoga teachers out, and like I'm busting my butt over here paying my dues every year, and like there's nothing much different.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I understand where they're coming from, but I think the standards are going to just create that really solid foundation so that we can keep building it up. And then I think as teacher trainers present it as something for us as teachers to be proud of, then teachers can take that into the community and feel, more excited about it.
That's our hope. That is exactly what we hope we've begun and will continue to work on. And so, I hope that people will consider, joining and contributing to this community if they're eligible but haven't for one reason or another, or if they, had joined and left us. Again, I understand that means you're still eligible, and I hope you'll reconsider. And just in general, would, as I've said, just welcome any and all suggestions as to how we can make it worthwhile for folks.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for your time and chatting about this. I know that you're busy. I'm sure your inbox is consistently exploding with all types of concerns. And I think that, I just really appreciate the work that you guys are doing to make this something that's going to be great for all of us. So I hope that, listeners can kind of hear this and feel more excited about being a part of Yoga Alliance, as opposed to maybe feeling a bit like confused about why they're even paying for it.
Well, me too. And so thank you so much for inviting this conversation and for inviting me. I always chuckle when people sort of think about my inbox. I think that is just true of everyone everywhere at this point. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to share about Yoga Alliance or anything like that before we wrap up today?
I think we've covered, many of the pieces. Like I said, I think if anyone has heard any concerns or anything of concern in the announcement, I would just invite them to please reach out and let us know. We're happy to walk you through personally any of those details, and help you figure out how best to navigate them. And again, hope that folks will give us a chance or a second chance. And in any scenario, we'll just sort of let us know how we can do our jobs better. So thank you.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Shannon. This has been awesome.
Much appreciated.
All right. I hope that you guys enjoyed that episode of the podcast with the CEO of Yoga Alliance, Shannon Roche. Of course, make sure you're reaching out if you do have any questions, comments, anything like that, feedback for them. I think that it's really important that we are making sure that we speak up about this. I think that one of the biggest things with the changes around Yoga Alliance is that it feels like there's a very open platform for having conversations. And if you have a question or concern, make sure that your voice is heard. So you can reach out to Yoga Alliance at info@yogaalliance.org. You can head on over to their website, which is yogaalliance.org, or you can call them at 1-888-921-9642. And those are really great ways to get a hold of them and get any of your questions and concerns answered. I felt like this was a really positive, open conversation, and I feel very hopeful for, where we can go as yoga teachers and as a yoga community. And I hope that you do as well. So you can find show notes for everything that we talked about today over on the website at mbomyoga.com. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And of course, you can join the private Facebook community at Yoga Business Badasses. Just search it in the search bar on Facebook and I will let you on in. Of course, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback from me, you can reach me at info@mbomyoga.com. I always love to hear from you guys. All right, that's all from me, and I will see you next week. Namaste.